Hello there, everyone. I'm Gaylen Morse, and welcome to Journey to Recovery. We appreciate having you along today. This podcast is titled Managing Perfectionism. On today's program, we'll talk with Dr. Hal Baumchen about high standards, looking perfect, and finding value in our performance. We'll look at key areas where you can escape the endless trap of trying to get it right. Thanks for joining us today. Our podcast focuses on the co-occurring disorders of mental health and substance abuse. We present a wide range of thought-provoking, hopeful, and positive topics from a clinical yet practical perspective. And we provide a solid, truly integrated co-occurring disorder resource you can use in your treatment program or in your own recovery. Our host is Dr. Hal Baumchen, a licensed clinical psychologist and licensed alcohol and drug counselor. He's the executive director of Northland Counseling Services and the president of North Star Regional Co-occurring Disorder Treatment Programs. He's an author, speaker, and clinician with over 30 years of counseling experience. I'm here today with Tim Bode, operations director at Northland Counseling Services, and with Dr. Hal Baumchen, our host at Journey to Recovery. Hey guys, try to pay attention because we want to get this show perfect.
Oh, sorry, Gaylen. I was doing something else.
It's hard to get things perfect. We're going to talk today about perfectionism and high standards, and we talk about recovery on this program. But a lot of people struggle with perfectionism. And then our next episode, we're going to talk about procrastination, and that tends to be two sides of the same coin.
What is perfectionism?
Perfectionism, well, perfectionists aspire to achieve super high standards. They want to get it right, do it right, have it right, and they get bogged down in small details, oftentimes that other people don't even see or care about.
Right. So being a perfectionist myself, I know that perfectionists are often very critical of their own performance.
Perfectionism is different than striving for excellence. People who pursue excellence in a healthy way take genuine pleasure in meeting high standards, and we'll call them emotionally high producers, which is something I think is really going to be helpful for the three of us.
Yes.
Perfectionists are motivated by self-doubt, fear of disapproval or ridicule or rejection or criticism from someone. And positive feelings about self are actually connected to achievement or performance at superior levels. And the perfectionist is driven to succeed and becomes anxious when self-imposed goals are not met.
I like that thing about emotionally healthy high producers.
Right, because that fits all of us, doesn't it? We have to find some way to not just call ourselves perfectionists, but why do we spend so much time trying to get it right or have a good quality product or whatever we're putting ourselves into? We want to do it right. All of us are like that. So I'm happy to have this concept as well, this emotionally healthy high producer.
It feels like it gives us a way to not necessarily compromise our standards and say we're going to do a poor job, but also not have to shoot for that perfect outcome or result.
Right, and still call ourselves emotionally healthy, which is nice.
Yes, right, exactly.
A couple different variations of perfectionism I want to draw your attention to today. I found it helpful to divide perfectionism into two subtypes. The first is that organized type, characterized by being neat, tidy, super organized, especially in areas such as appearance, housework, neatness of personal space, maybe your grades if you're still in college or high school, your speech, any presentation you make, your clothing, all of that has to look perfect and be perfect. Or the way you raise your children and how they behave in public, that might fall into this category as well. The second type, which I relate to more, if you looked at my coffee table in my office, you would say, this guy is not neat, tidy, or organized, but he said he's sort of perfectionistic. What's going on? I'm more of the driven type. So we have that organized type and then the driven type. The driven person that's characterized by being ambitious, super determined, focused on a project, and motivated. The driven type often strives for high achievement and can be single-minded in their goals, actually to the detriment of other important things such as relationships.
Right. So, Gaylen, which type are you?
And you can be both.
Look around, Tim. I'm certainly not the organized. Everything must be in its place. Have a place, be in the. No, I'm more the driven type.
Yes, the same is true of me. I'm not the organized type. I'm the driven type.
I've seen your desk, come to think of it.
You
know,
have.
stacks of, like mine,
Yes.
stacks of papers. And
See, I'm always fortunate that I can put all that stuff away before you guys get here.
I see.
For those of you who are listening or watching, we come to Gaylen's studio and do our recording. So he invites us in, and we take over the place and set up things that work for us in our podcast. I wrote a little scale that we use in one of our programs called the Perfectionism Scale for Adults. There's a couple of different items on there I wanted to talk through. Gaylen, can you get us started with that?
Number one, I think, is my parents set very high standards for me.
What we're talking about here is, why did I become so perfectionistic? What was going on that kind of set the stage for me? And sometimes that one is true for perfectionists, that somebody in their life, like parents, had very high standards, and you learn to internalize that.
Another one is, as a child, I was punished for doing things less than perfectly.
They go hand in hand, don't they?
Yes,
So
sure do.
my folks set high standards, and when I didn't meet them, then there was a consequence or even a punishment for doing things less than perfect.
So the next one is kind of an internal one. If I do not set the highest standards for myself, I'm likely to end up a second-rate person.
So you can see what happened here. Somebody else set high standards. Pretty soon I've internalized that, and now this is a service I supply for myself.
Yeah, right. And then another one, it is important to me that I be thoroughly competent in everything I do. That relates to that one we just talked about.
Right. So super high standards for myself. I have to be competent in everything that I do. And as we talk through this topic, I want you to hear the black and white, all or nothing standards that are set up by most perfectionists. I have to do it right, say it right, get it right in every area, not just some.
Another one, certainly not for me. I'm a neat, tidy, and organized person.
Right. So back to the two subtypes. And you might think like, yep, that's me. I've got to vacuum the rug every day, and all the vacuum lines have to be perfectly matched. And I can't leave the house before I wipe the counter down and get everything nice and neat, perfect.
I'm certainly not that, as we said, but I have a friend who is that way. She's very much, everything has to be very organized.
Yeah, which is really nice. If you have the luxury of living with someone like that, but not being like that yourself, kind of nice.
Yeah.
I set higher standards or higher goals than most people's. Again, maybe a little bit of that driven subtype we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Another one, kind of that all or nothing. If someone does a task at work or school better than me, then I feel like I failed the whole task.
So there can be some competition that occurs in perfectionism. Again, be the best as compared to who? Well, sometimes it's compared to the rest of the class, or sometimes it's just your own self-imposed standards.
And here's another one along those lines. If I fail partly, it's as bad as being a complete failure.
Right. All or nothing,
Right.
Black or white.
Right.
What do you have for us, Gaylen?
Well, how about I'm good at focusing my efforts on attaining a goal?
Right. So again, that driven person can be super focused to the detriment of relationships.
How about this one? I tend to get behind in my work because I repeat things over and over, trying to get them perfect.
Tim, did you hear about the butcher who backed into the meat grinder and got a little behind in his work? That's what's happening with the perfectionist, not backing into the meat grinder, but like you said, looking at it again, then not really liking it. Maybe I could tweak on it, fix it, try another. I'm going to start over. And the perfectionist can lose some time and actually get behind, run late. There's some other things that go along with this as well.
I think one of the more external ideas is that the fewer mistakes I make, the more people will like me.
I think that's at the heart of this whole problem, Gaylen, is that I get my value and worth because I have these high standards and I get it right and I do it right. And people are going to like me if I get it right, and they're not going to like me if I'm less than perfect. It's not true. We're going to come back to that. We want to challenge that, but that's at the heart of why are you so driven to do it right and get it right.
Dr. Hal, can we talk about the perfectionist versus the high achiever?
Right. So the high achiever, we talked about how grateful we are that we can call ourselves high achievers and not have to just label ourselves as perfectionists. High achievers, like perfectionists, want to be better people and achieve great things, get a lot done. Both strive to do their best, but high achievers actually can accept making a mistake as well as risking failure and as just part of the achievement process and part of being human. Mistakes and failures are often crippling for a perfectionist, but they can be instruction or a learning process for the high achiever. So little differences there.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the causes and characteristics of perfectionism?
Well, the perfectionist is really concerned with making mistakes. This person holds exceedingly high standards and is frequently overcritical of their own behavior and their own level of achievement. And that comes from that parental expectations and maybe parental criticism that you felt when you were growing up. Vacuuming for your mom became a branch of physics. It had to be done perfectly, or she'd snatch that vacuum away. Let me do it. You don't know what you're doing. And that kind of thing can create that high standards and want to get it right and do it right to please somebody else.
Dr. Hal, for some perfectionists, is it true that identity is linked to their performance?
Right. I would say 99% of the problem comes with feeling valuable and worthwhile if you perform at a super high level. Some perfectionists link their achievements to how valuable they are, and if they have certain titles or positions or wealth or great grades and other great accomplishments, then they can feel good about themselves and they have a higher sense of self-esteem and self-worth.
Yeah, and they may also look for emotional fulfillment through the honor, the praise, the approval, affirmation, attention, all those things that they receive from others.
And you can never get enough of that. And I don't want you to say, nice podcast, Hal. I want you to flop on the floor and say, sun God, I worship you. But that kind of praise and attention never comes. So then you just raise the bar. Expect more of yourself. Want to hit the target because you're actually telling yourself, if I did a good enough job, that kind of attention or value would, in fact, come. But it's a trap.
Mm-hmm. So you think to yourself, if I perform at a high enough level, I'll feel good about myself, right?
So the person achieves a great success, but I still don't feel good about myself. I must not have performed at a high enough level. And this strategy will never work because the premise is faulty. The premise is, if I achieve at a high level, you're going to like me. You don't seem to really give me that flop on the floor kind of praise that I was looking for. I must not have performed at a high enough level. But the premise is whacked. You're not going to get value and worth tied to your performance. We want to tie that to character traits. I'm kind, loving, patient, understanding. I'm respectful and responsible. Get some character traits you can tie your worth and value to, not your performance.
Dr. Hal, can you talk a little bit about how a perfectionist has doubts about the things that they do or their decisions that they make?
Right, because the standard is so high. I think you were talking about this before we turned the microphones on, where I just want more information. I wanted to look at it again. I better call somebody. Hey, my sister doesn't come into town until Tuesday. That's tomorrow. So, and we put things off or we want more information and we're filled with insecurity and doubt. We want to get it right, but we don't have all the materials to get it right.
Yeah, and that really can slow you down, right, and interrupt your work,
Yep.
cause you to not get things done.
Absolutely. We're going to talk next podcast about procrastination. And again, the procrastinator wants all of the things to be right. Can't get it right. Put it off until I can get it right.
Sounds a lot like all or nothing thinking.
Right. You would think that the perfectionist could sort of live with, well, that's good enough. But that's tough for the perfectionist. So it becomes black and white, all or nothing thinking. And that's part of the driving force in perfectionism.
So let's talk about some ways to maybe relax standards, what a perfectionist can do to relax their standards a bit.
When you think about that phrase, relaxing the standard, isn't that just tough to hear about?
It is.
Shut up. I don't want to hear about relaxing the standard. I want to hear about hitting the standard, hitting it every time. Don't you have a pill for that or something? Absolutely not. Yeah.
But there are some things that we as perfectionists and other perfectionists can do, right?
Yes, change the way you think. So we'll go over a couple of those. What do you have, Gaylen? Do you have some of those?
Well, I think one of the biggest things would be figure out how. And this one is a great statement, but I'm not sure how you do it. Allow yourself to be less than perfect.
Right. Or learn to accept good enough. That kind of language, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. That kind of language is tough. Good enough, okay, ordinary, average. Wow. But I can say it to myself and challenge myself. Let it go. It's good enough. Other people can live with this. My worth is not in my performance. My worth is in my character.
Mm-hmm. And going along with that, say to yourself, I'm able to accept myself the way I am.
Right. Instead of I'll accept myself once I hit all of these targets.
Right.
I just want to remind you that when the perfectionist sets a goal, right before they're going to hit it or right as they're hitting it, they often raise the bar and then feel inferior, inadequate because they missed the bar, but they missed it only because they raised it right as they were, about to hit it.
Right. So you say, okay, this is my goal. This is what I'm going to do. And then as you get to that goal, you have that second thought like, oh, well, maybe that's really not quite good enough. Maybe I need to get up to this level. Right?
Why would we do that? Because we're looking for some kind of emotional fulfillment that was supposed to come when we hit the bar. It didn't come, so I raised the bar thinking I'll be fulfilled when I hit the higher level.
How about I accept my decisions without second guessing myself?
Could you say that another way?
How about once in a while I can be average, normal, and usual?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Instead of being perfect, being fantastic, being the best. No, I'm going to be usual, normal, average, okay, ordinary, and good enough. It's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. And let's remind ourselves that what others think of us do not determine our success or worth.
Yes, we're not convinced of that, but that is true. Your value and worth is a given. You don't have to get somebody else's approval in order to be valuable. And I'm relaxing my standards for tidiness, structure, and organization. I'm only going to vacuum once a week, or I'm only going to wash the car once a week. And it would be hard for people, but learn to relax the standard and live with the anxiety that evokes. Work down your anxiety another way instead of always trying to clean something in order to feel good enough about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk now about some ways to get control of perfectionism.
Once you're aware of the ways in which you expect yourself to be perfect, you can start to change your behavior and change your behavior by the way you think. Choose a few of the strategies outlined here that we're going to go over that will help you understand what you need to do to accept imperfections and accept your humanness.
One thing I think that works in a lot of areas is to create a support network for yourself that will enable some of these activities.
So you could seek out people who are not perfectionists and they could maybe hold you accountable or help you stay honest. And we ask you to look for people who forgive and forget when you make mistakes They don't see everything as a failure. They see things as a growth opportunity. And they know that you're going to struggle with this, but look for positive reinforcement, not when you hit the target, but positive reinforcement for your character.
Yes, before we went on air, I was talking about a friend of mine who used to tell me it may not be okay by or good enough for Tim Bode standards, but it's okay for everyone else's standards, so you just should be done with it.
Right, which brings us to lower your mistake. I'm sorry.
Lower your expectations.
Right. Yeah. So accept more mistakes.
There you go.
And lower your expectations. You cannot expect to completely change your behavior or your expectations automatically or instantly. Take small, intentional steps toward that change. And although a difficult concept for the perfectionist, consider shooting for average, which we've mentioned before.
Another one, make a list of the advantages and disadvantages of being perfect.
What would the disadvantages of being perfect be? What would your guess be?
I don't know, can't think of any.
One of the disadvantages is it can be tough on relationships. Even though that you're demanding on yourself, other people are like, let it go, let's go. Can't we just go to the park and play? No, we can't go to the park and play because I'm still trying to get this perfect. And so it can be tough on family life.
Mm-hmm. And I think it can, related to that, lead to you never getting a project done. You know, you're working, you're always working on something because it's never good enough for you.
Right. So you can't relax, you can't enjoy life. That's tough on you, and it's tough on the people around you as well. It can lead to things like substance abuse and eating disorders. So because you feel bad about yourself, you're looking for instant comfort through a substance.
You know, another thing you can do is review your goals and make sure they're realistic.
Instead of super over-the-top expectations that you're holding for yourself. And maybe you, like you brought up earlier, bounce those by your support network to see what they think of your goals and how realistic your goals actually are.
Mm-hmm. How about setting strict time limits for your projects?
Tough, because we always exceed that. When we just set a goal, what was that thing that you would say that the first 90%?
The first, right, the 90 rule of production schedules, the first 90% of the project takes 90% of the time, and the last 10% of the project takes the other 90% of the time.
And that's so true for everybody on every project, but especially true for perfectionists who probably need to set some strict time limits for their projects. And then after that time limit, it's not based on performance, it's based on the time is ended. And so I'm going to move on because the time frame is up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something that's really hard to do, but make friends learn to accept criticism.
Instead of beating yourselves up when somebody says, could you try it another way, or let it go now even, and you feel criticized by that. But to say, hey, that's growth for me if I can accept criticism. And criticism for the perfectionist is in fact therapeutic. Like, learn to grow by accepting that. Like, hey, what they said had some point. I don't have to be argumentative or defensive here. I'm going to receive it in the best way, in the way that they intended. Growing and learning is part of overcoming perfectionism. Rather than condemning yourself for mistakes and failures, envision setbacks as momentary and then see them as a learning and growth opportunity. The relentless pursuit of impossible standards actually robs you of living the joys or having the joys of living life. Achievements and accomplishments do not determine your value and your worth. When you let go of the ideal that humans have to be perfect in order to have value, then you're going to feel angry with yourself and embarrassed when you make a mistake. You'll begin to see that criticism is information that you can learn from, and you'll no longer need to avoid it. And in fact, you can leverage criticism and those little mistakes in life, leverage those into the person you want to be.
Well, thanks everybody for listening to today's podcast. Today we were talking about managing perfectionism. We certainly hope you enjoyed it. Also, we invite you to check out resources on the web at journeytorecovery.com. There you can download other materials that will help you develop skills to identify emotional problems, reduce symptoms, and prevent relapse at journeytorecovery.com. We've been visiting with author, speaker, and clinical psychologist Dr. Hal Baumchen. I'm Gaylen Morse. Thanks for listening to today's program. See you next time on Journey to Recovery. Remember, recovery is a journey. Enjoy the ride.